The cold silence of space pressed against the hull of the Zirath warship. The Akashor, a massive, gleaming vessel that cut through the void like a predator stalking its prey. The stars outside seemed distant, uncaring, mere pinpricks of light in the oppressive darkness that surrounded the ship. Within, the air was thick with anticipation, tension hanging heavy in the corridors. The crew moved like shadows, their actions precise and deliberate. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail, until, of course, it wasn't. Cirrus stood before the wide viewport of the warship's command center, her gaze fixed on the planet below. It was a desolate world, cloaked in the dull hues of barren landscapes and the faintest flicker of life clinging to its surface. The humans had made their home there, a world not entirely of their own making, and certainly not one the Zirath Empire had any use for, at least, not until now. The mission had been simple: secure the planet, extract resources, intimidate the native population into submission. It should have been straightforward, routine even. Cirrus had carried out countless such missions before, leaving worlds trembling in the wake of her arrival, bending to the will of her empire without so much as a whisper of protest. Yet, as the warship hovered over the human colony, something felt different. The usual confidence that radiated from Cirrus, the unshakable certainty in her place as the supreme force in the galaxy, wavered ever so slightly. The commander of the human forces, a mere man, stood in her mind like an anomaly, an imperfection in the universe she had built around herself. Commander Nathaniel Carter. She had studied his record, impressive by human standards, strategist, leader, but still a human. A weak, fragile creature of flesh and bone, with no real power. She had expected him to cower at her feet, to beg for the mercy of the Zirath. But something about the way his name echoed in her mind stirred a question she had never allowed herself to entertain. Why hadn't he been afraid? Why did the thought of him intrigue her, even disturb her? "Commander Cirrus," a voice broke through her thoughts. Lieutenant Kalen stood at attention by the door, his expression neutral, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. "The human commander has requested a meeting. He insists it be in person." Cirrus did not turn to face him. Her eyes remained fixed on the planet below, as if she were looking at something far more distant than just a mere colony. "Did he?" she murmured, her voice smooth but tinged with a cold edge. The thought of meeting this human in person felt like an irritation, a needless delay in what should have been a swift and simple operation. She could obliterate the human defenses with a single command, yet the request to meet him, it gnawed at her. There was something about this human that tugged at her in a way she could not explain. "Prepare the shuttle," she ordered, finally turning to face Kalen. Her eyes, pale and unyielding like ice, bore into his for a moment longer than necessary. "I will meet him." As Kalen nodded and hurried to comply, Cirrus allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had been trained to see everything as a matter of power, control, dominance. There was no place for weakness, for doubt, within the ranks of the Zirath. It was a society built on the principle that those who could dominate, those who could wield strength and force, deserved to rule. To show any form of submission was to be discarded, to be forgotten. And yet, here she was, wondering about the very human she had dismissed as insignificant. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The shuttle ride to the human compound was swift. The feeling of the metal walls encasing her, the hum of the engines beneath her feet, usually gave Cirrus a sense of calm. Today, it felt suffocating. She stared ahead, her hand resting lightly on the armrest, the quiet only broken by the occasional hum of communication through the shuttle's internal systems. She had never needed to ask questions, not in her line of work. The answers were always there, ready for her to claim. She never needed to doubt. And yet, now, in the depths of her mind, there was a nagging question, one she couldn't escape. What makes him different? The shuttle finally landed with a soft jolt, the doors hissing open to reveal the stark utilitarian human base. Everything here was unremarkable, nothing like the grandeur of Zirath cities. There was no opulence, no towering monuments to victory or heritage. just a simple, barren outpost clinging to life on a world that seemed to care little for its inhabitants. As Sarah stepped onto the ground, she felt the subtle shift in the air. The humans were watching her, their eyes filled with curiosity and wariness. She felt no fear from them, only a curious, strange respect. It bothered her. Her gaze swept over the humans who stood in formation, and her eyes locked onto the figure at the front, Commander Nathaniel Carter. He was taller than most humans, his posture straight, his face composed, his expression unreadable. There was no sign of fear or trepidation in his eyes. Instead, they were clear, direct, unflinching, as if he saw her not as a conqueror, but as a person, one who could be understood. For a moment, time seemed to stretch between them, the space between her and him laden with unspoken questions. He did not kneel before her, as so many others had done. He did not bow or show any sign of submission. He merely stood there, waiting. Saris felt a flicker of something within her chest, something she could not name, something that felt both like a crack in the wall of her certainty and a question she had never allowed herself to ask. Why is he not afraid? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered, and it was only then that Saris realized that for the first time in her life, she was not the one in control. The air inside the command tent felt heavier than usual, thick with an unease that Saris couldn't place. The humans, Commander Nathaniel Carter most notably, watched her with an unsettling intensity. She could feel their gazes, the weight of their scrutiny like a physical presence pressing down on her, but there was no malice in it, only curiosity. It had been an hour since their first meeting, an hour that felt like a lifetime, and yet the tension between her and the human commander had only grown. The heat of their unspoken challenge simmered beneath the surface of every exchange. He had greeted her with the formality of a leader, but not the fear of a subjugated creature. His eyes, when they met hers, had not wavered, not once, despite the power she exuded. No one, in all her years, had ever dared to look at her like that. "Commander Saris," Nathaniel had said, his voice steady, almost warm. "We should speak of terms." He hadn't flinched, hadn't shown the slightest hesitation. It disturbed her, more than she was willing to admit. She crossed the room now, her boots echoing on the cold metal floors of the human base. Her senses were sharpened, every movement deliberate, her gaze sweeping over the map of the colony that sprawled across the table before her. It wasn't just the humans who were watching. She felt eyes on her from all corners of the tent, waiting for her next move, waiting for a misstep. She loomed over the table, scanning the digital representations of the colony, her fingers tapping lightly on the screen as if it were a lifeline. For a moment, she lost herself in the data. Estimates on resources, human defenses, strategic points of entry. But there was something missing, a detail so small, yet so crucial, that she couldn't put it together. It was as if the puzzle before her had a piece that was never meant to fit. It left her uneasy, like a phantom whisper at the edge of her mind. "Commander," Nathaniel's voice cut through her thoughts, steady, unyielding. "Perhaps we should begin with the humans' terms." Saris glanced up sharply. He had moved closer, standing beside her now, his broad frame casting a long shadow on the digital display. For a moment, she almost saw him as a threat, a disruption in her carefully ordered world. A human commander, standing beside her, suggesting that she should negotiate. The thought alone grated against everything she had ever been taught. "I am here to dictate the terms," she said, her voice low, authoritative, "not to listen to the demands of your kind." Nathaniel didn't flinch. He merely inclined his head slightly, a gesture that could be perceived as respect or perhaps a challenge. "The Jirath have always taken by force," he said, his voice calm, almost scholarly. "But it's not always the best way to secure what you want." Saris felt her pulse quicken. It wasn't the words that rattled her, it was the way he spoke them, as though he were the one in command here, and she was simply another player in his game. The feeling crawled beneath her skin, an irritation she didn't understand, one that threatened to escalate into something more. "You think you can teach me something?" she asked, turning her gaze fully on him. Her eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, she considered what he had said. Was there something to his words? Something she might have overlooked? Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I think we both have something to learn. But that's the only way forward, isn't it? It's not about forcing the other to bend. It's about understanding how we can both stand. Sarah stiffened. His words were like poison to her, soft but insidious. How dare he imply that her strength was anything but absolute, that she should learn to understand instead of command. She could feel the flames of anger flicker to life inside her chest, and yet, something else was there too, something she had no name for. A gnawing sensation at the back of her mind, a question, a doubt. Enough. She stood straighter, her voice cutting through the silence with the sharpness of a blade. This conversation is over. You know the terms. Surrender your planet and your resources, or face annihilation. Nathaniel met her gaze, unwavering. It's never that simple, is it? You're not just here to take. There's something else driving you, something you're not telling me. Saris's pulse quickened, her heart thudding in her chest. He was too perceptive, too right. The longer she stayed here, the more she was forced to confront something she had never before allowed herself to acknowledge. He was unyielding, strong in ways she could never have predicted. He didn't just challenge her authority. He seemed to understand her in ways she didn't understand herself. You know nothing of me, she said through clenched teeth, forcing her words to remain steady. But inside, something cracked. She had no control over this. This unease, this fascination with him. It unsettled her in ways she could not understand. I know that you're not the monster you want me to believe, Nathaniel replied softly, his tone even. And that's why we can talk. We're not enemies, Saris. We're just different, but that doesn't mean we can't find a way to work together. Saris felt a surge of heat rise to her face, a flush that had nothing to do with anger. It was something new, something disconcerting. The realization settled over her like a weight, a sense of her own vulnerability slipping through the cracks of her facade. But before she could respond, a sudden alarm rang through the base, sharp and insistent. The loud, urgent beeping shattered the tension between them. Saris's reflexes kicked in immediately, her hand moving to her weapon, her body coiled and ready for action. We have an incoming breach. Kalen's voice rang out over the comms, his tone frantic. A human faction, they've breached the outer perimeter. The words hit her like a physical blow. A human faction? Here? Now? The audacity of it. Without hesitation, Saris's hand slammed against the table, sending a flurry of holographic images scattering into the air. Her mind raced, calculating the risk, the immediate threat. There was no time for subtlety now. Her authority, her empire, her command, all of it was at stake. Prepare for battle, she commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding once more. We leave immediately. As the humans scrambled to respond, Saris felt the shift in the air. She wasn't just here to secure resources anymore. This wasn't just a mission. This was war. And for the first time in a long time, she was no longer sure who the real enemy was. The skies above the human base were thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning fuel. Saris stood at the command center, her eyes narrowed as she watched the chaos unfolding before her. The breach had been more than just a surprise. It was a declaration. The human faction that had attacked was well coordinated, ruthless, and as their presence became undeniable, the full scope of the threat began to take shape. It wasn't just an isolated skirmish. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Commander Saris, Kalen's voice crackled over the comms, rough with static. We've identified the attackers. It's not just a rogue faction. It's a resistance, one that's been operating under our radar for months. They're not just human. Her pulse quickened at the words. Not just human. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Resistance groups were a given in any war, but to have one emerge so suddenly from within the humans and so well prepared suggested a level of coordination she had not anticipated. "Tell me everything," Saris demanded, her voice low but commanding. "We've captured one of their operatives," Kalen continued, voice strained. "They're not just fighting back. They've aligned themselves with something else. Alien technology, Commander. Advanced and completely unfamiliar." The room seemed to freeze, every eye turning toward her as the gravity of Kalen's words sank in. Alien technology. For a moment, Saris felt an involuntary chill race down her spine. The Jirath were the most advanced species in the galaxy, their technology untouchable. But alien technology beyond even that? A thought formed, dark and unsettling. Could they have found something even the Jirath hadn't discovered? Something that could challenge everything she had come to believe? "Show me," Saris ordered, voice clipped. "Now." A series of holographic images flickered into life before her, projecting data that shifted with each passing second. Images of strange, otherworldly devices, sleek and metallic, appeared, their designs unlike anything Saris had ever seen. They were too advanced to belong to any known civilization, their forms so alien they seemed to mock the very concept of technology as she knew it. "Are these weapons?" she asked, her tone sharp as she studied the images, but Kalen shook his head. "No, Commander," he replied. "They're not weapons in the conventional sense. These devices, they alter perception. They manipulate the mind. We think they might be some kind of signal disruptor, designed to disable our technology." Saris's breath caught in her throat. Signal disruptors. They could make her force's most advanced weapons useless. This was not just a threat. It was a direct assault on her control, on everything she had built. Her mind raced. If these humans had somehow allied themselves with a force capable of such technology, it was no longer just about conquering a planet. It was about preserving her people, her empire. Her heart thudded in her chest as she thought of the delicate web of alliances she had spent years weaving, the delicate balance of power that could crumble with a single wrong move. "We need to find their base," she said, turning to Kalen, her voice hard and decisive. "Now!" Kalen hesitated for a split second before nodding. "We're on it, Commander. But there's more." Saris didn't need to ask. She could see it in Kalen's face. The hesitation, the wariness. There was something else, something darker lurking beneath the surface of the situation. "What is it?" she pressed, the urgency in her tone matching the rising tide of anxiety within her. "We've identified one of their leaders. We're still running facial recognition. But there's something strange, Commander. The human we've captured, he's connected to the resistance leader. We think they might be familiar." Saris's brow furrowed in confusion. Familiar? What did that mean? The word was too simple, too common to convey the weight she felt in her gut. She could see Kalen's discomfort. "You're not telling me everything. What's the connection?" Kalen hesitated, then placed a small hologram on the table between them. The image was grainy, but Saris could make out enough to see a human face, a face she recognized. It was him, Nathaniel Carter. Her stomach twisted. She had expected many things, but not this. The human commander, the same one who had spoken to her with such unnerving calm, the same one who had pushed her, provoked her into doubts, was at the heart of the resistance, a leader of those who dared to oppose her. Her pulse thundered in her ears as everything in her world shifted. How? The question left her lips before she could stop it, but Kalen's response was quick, his words cutting through the silence. "We're not sure yet, but it's clear. He's been playing both sides. And now he's either leading the resistance or, at the very least, a part of it." The realization crashed over Saris like a tidal wave. She had allowed him close, let him see her vulnerabilities, her authority, her entire strategy, and all along he had been working against her, against everything she stood for. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in on her. The threat wasn't just external, it was internal. She had underestimated Nathaniel, and it had cost her. The humans, with their audacity and their hidden alliances, were no longer the only threat. Nathaniel Carter himself had become the most dangerous variable of all. "Find him," she said, her voice cold and even. "Now." Kalen nodded quickly, already pulling up data and coordinating teams. As he worked, Saris turned back to the images of the alien technology. Her mind was still reeling, her thoughts a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. She had to face the truth. Nathaniel had played her. The games, the tense negotiations, they had all been a facade, and she had fallen for it. A new reality was taking shape, one that had nothing to do with conquering this planet. Nathaniel Carter had shown her that. But what did he want now? What did he expect her to do with the knowledge that the humans, and whatever alien force they had aligned with, were no longer afraid of her? What could she do now, with everything she had built beginning to crumble? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden transmission, and for a moment she thought it was just another report. But when she saw the hologram light up before her, a sharp breath caught in her throat. It was Nathaniel. His image flickered with static, but there was no mistaking the cold, challenging gleam in his eyes. "I knew you'd find me eventually," his voice crackled, a mocking edge beneath the calm. "But I'm afraid you're too late, Saris." For the first time since she'd set foot on this planet, Saris felt true fear stir within her. Nathaniel Carter wasn't just playing the game, he had changed it, and now she had no choice but to follow. The silence in the command room was suffocating, thick with the weight of unspoken questions and rising tension. Saris stood before the hologram of Nathaniel, his smirk unmistakable despite the poor transmission. The room was still, the faint hum of equipment barely audible over the thrum of her own heartbeat. She fought to maintain composure, every instinct screaming for her to make a move, to act. But Nathaniel had already taken the first step in their game, and now it was her turn to respond. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said, her voice cold but deliberate. "You think you can control this, Nathaniel, but you're wrong." The hologram flickered, and his lips curled into a more pronounced smile, the look in his eyes a mix of defiance and amusement. He was toying with her. Every word, every gesture, a calculated move. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a battle for control of the planet anymore. This was personal. Nathaniel had maneuvered them both into a position where every move she made was a risk. "You've been on this planet for how long?" Nathaniel's voice crackled through the static, drawing Saris's attention back to the present. "You think you know everything, but you've been blind, Commander. I thought you were smarter than this." Her jaw tightened. Blind? He was the one who had underestimated her, the one who had miscalculated his own moves. "I'm not the one who's been deceiving everyone," she shot back, her tone sharp, calculated. "I never pretended to be something I'm not. The real question, Nathaniel, is why you've gone this far. What is it you're really after?" For a moment, there was nothing but the crackle of static. Then his voice, quieter but laced with something darker, returned. "You still don't understand, do you? This is about more than you or me. It's about everything. The humans have always been pawns in this game, and I'm done playing by their rules. It's time to take control." Control. The word reverberated in her mind, like the echo of a truth she wasn't ready to confront. Had she been so focused on winning, on maintaining her empire, that she had missed something far more dangerous? Something deeper than a mere military conquest? She had been a part of something bigger than her own ambitions, and now she was starting to realize that Nathaniel had seen it all along. "You've made your move, and I'll make mine," Saris said, her voice steady despite the churn of thoughts in her mind. "But be warned, Nathaniel, you won't win this, not with me in the way." The hologram flickered again before the transmission cut off entirely, leaving Saris staring at the empty space where Nathaniel's image had once been. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, There was a fire in her chest, a need to put an end to this, to understand the full extent of Nathaniel's treachery. But that would come later. Now she needed to prepare. Whatever Nathaniel was planning, it was something far bigger than a simple rebellion, and it had something to do with the alien technology that had thrown everything off balance. "Commander, we've located their base." Kaylin's voice broke through her thoughts, snapping her back to reality. "It's on the outskirts of the human capital, hidden beneath the city's infrastructure. We've already dispatched teams to secure the area." "Good," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Get me a full report. I need everything we have on this base. We're moving in." Kaylin hesitated for a brief moment before responding. "Understood. But Commander, there's something else. We've been analyzing the alien tech, and it's unlike anything we've seen before. It's adaptive. We think it's capable of evolving, changing based on its environment. We don't know what it's doing or how it works, but it's dangerous." Her chest tightened at the implication. Adaptive technology. The thought was almost too much to process. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a living, breathing entity in itself, capable of shifting its purpose, evolving beyond any control. It was a game changer, one that could redefine everything she thought she knew about the war they were fighting. "Get me a team of engineers," Sarah snapped, her mind already racing ahead to the next steps. "We need to neutralize that tech before it becomes a real threat, and make sure the base is secure. I won't risk anything else slipping through our fingers." Kaylin's acknowledgement was quick, but Sarah barely registered it. Her mind was already fixated on the choices ahead. The alien tech was just a piece of the puzzle, but Nathaniel was the key. His sudden appearance in the Resistance, his use of this technology, it wasn't a coincidence. Whatever game he was playing, he was no longer just a thorn in her side. He was the axis on which the future of this planet and her entire empire would turn. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah found herself caught between two conflicting desires: the need to crush Nathaniel and his rebellion once and for all, and the fear that doing so might uncover truths she wasn't ready to face. His words echoed in her mind. "It's about more than you or me." What did he know that she didn't? And why had he chosen now to make his move? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden arrival of a new transmission. This one wasn't from Nathaniel. It was a signal from the captured Resistance member, the one who had once been under their control. Sarah's fingers hovered over the console as the screen flickered to life, revealing the haggard face of the man. His eyes were wild, his breath ragged. He looked as though he had seen something far worse than the harsh interrogation he had endured. They've found it," the man gasped, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "The location of the core, the source of the technology. You have to stop them, Cirrus. It's not just weapons. They can control everything." Her heart skipped a beat. Control everything. The words reverberated in her mind, a cold shiver running down her spine. This was bigger than her, bigger than the war, than Nathaniel, than any personal vendetta. This was about something far more dangerous. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice tight, her patience thinning. But the man didn't answer. His face twisted in fear before the transmission cut off abruptly. Sarah stood motionless, the weight of his words sinking in like stones in her gut. Control everything. The alien technology wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, one that could unlock forces they had no hope of understanding, let alone containing. She had been too focused on the human resistance, too obsessed with Nathaniel's betrayal, that she hadn't seen the full picture. And now it was too late. "Commander?" Kaylin's voice broke through her thoughts, urgent now. "We've got a situation. There's a massive energy surge coming from the Resistance base. We think they've activated the core." Everything inside Cirrus stilled. The core, the source of the alien technology, and if Nathaniel had control of it, it could change everything. Without another word, she turned on her heel and headed for the exit. The stakes had just been raised to an unimaginable level. It was time to end this. For good. The tension in the air felt thick enough to suffocate, an invisible weight pressing down on Cirrus as she made her way through the cold, sterile halls of the command ship. Her footsteps echoed, sharp against the silence, each one a beat in the symphony of a war that had stretched on for years. But this time, something was different. The war was no longer just a battle for survival, no longer just about control. It was about understanding. And she was about to uncover the truth. The energy surge from the resistance base had been more than just a signal. It had been a wake-up call. The core, the heart of the alien technology Nathaniel had manipulated, had been activated. And the moment she'd received word, the walls around her had seemed to close in, every thought, every plan, colliding into a single undeniable truth. This is it. This is the end. She'd prepared for many things during her career: conflict, loss, betrayal. But what lay ahead now was something far more dangerous. The alien technology that Nathaniel had uncovered, the power he sought, wasn't just about weapons. It was about rewriting everything. The technology wasn't just adaptive, it was sentient. It could evolve beyond anything they understood. Nathaniel, in his arrogance, had unleashed something far more powerful than he had ever intended. And now, she was about to face him, face to face, for the final confrontation. Her fingers hovered over the controls in the command room as she watched the hologram of Nathaniel appear once more. His face was hard, determined, but beneath that there was something else. Fear. He knew what he had unleashed. He had underestimated the very thing he had thought he could control. "I'm done playing games, Cirrus." Nathaniel's voice was cold, laced with tension. "This ends here. I've already won." Cirrus studied him, the hologram flickering slightly as the surge from the base intensified. The core was close, closer than it had ever been. She could feel the power radiating from it, a force that threatened to overwhelm them both. But she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that the key to survival wasn't just in strength, it was in strategy. "You've only won if I let you," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He didn't understand. He had never understood her, never understood the true stakes of what they were playing for. "You can't stop this, Cirrus," he spat. "You're too late. The core is already in my control. With it, I can reshape the universe. Everything will bow to me. And you?" His eyes burned with unspoken ambition. "You'll never get in my way again." Her chest tightened. There it was. The root of everything. Nathaniel had never seen the bigger picture, never realized the true cost of what he was trying to control. It wasn't about power or domination. It was about balance. And the core wasn't just a weapon. It was a system that once activated would bind all living beings, all civilizations, into a single, inescapable order. There would be no room for freedom, no room for choice. Cirrus's resolve hardened. She had come too far, fought too hard, to let him succeed. She couldn't let him destroy everything she had worked for, everything she believed in. "You're wrong, Nathaniel," she said, her voice low but filled with certainty. "You think you can control it, but you can't. The core is a force of nature, not a tool. It doesn't serve you, it consumes." A flicker of doubt crossed Nathaniel's features, but it was fleeting, disappearing as quickly as it had come. He was too deep in his obsession to turn back now. "Enough of this," he growled. "I don't need your lectures." With a violent gesture, Nathaniel initiated a command. The entire room trembled, the walls vibrating with the raw power of the core, as it unleashed a pulse of energy that sent a shockwave across the base. Cirrus felt it through every bone, her body braced for impact. The system was becoming unstable. The core wasn't just a weapon, it was a ticking time bomb. In that moment, Cirrus made her decision. She turned away from the console, her hand moving toward the emergency override. She couldn't wait any longer. There was no time for hesitation. The core was too volatile, too dangerous. If Nathaniel wouldn't destroy it, she would have to. "Goodbye, Nathaniel," she whispered under her breath. the words barely audible as she activated the self-destruct sequence. The hologram flickered one last time before vanishing entirely, and the room was plunged into silence. She could feel the shift in the air as the countdown began, the final act of a war that had stretched on too long, that had claimed too many lives. With a final, defiant glance at the control panel, Saris turned and rushed from the room. The countdown echoed in her mind, each second a beat of her heart, a reminder that time was slipping away. As she ran through the corridors of the command ship, she knew what she had to do. She had to get to the core. She had to make sure the destruction was complete, that nothing would remain of Nathaniel's twisted ambition. But as she neared the central chamber, a new presence blocked her path. The last person she expected to see, Kalen, his face grim, his eyes dark with something more than just fear. "You're too late," Kalen said, his voice tight. "It's already started." She didn't need to ask what he meant. The core was beyond their control now, its power surging, its influence spreading like wildfire. The ship was coming apart at the seams. "I can stop it," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "We have to reach the control room." Kalen shook his head. "There's no time, Saris. The core is already consuming everything. We can't stop it. Not anymore." For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a heavy sigh, Kalen stepped aside, allowing her to pass. "If this is the end, then we'll face it together." They reached the central chamber together, the hum of the core resonating louder now, a primal force that felt alive, breathing, pulsing with power. Saris felt it in the pit of her stomach, the weight of what had been unleashed. And then, as if by fate, the countdown reached its final moments. The explosion was both deafening and blinding, a brilliant flash that engulfed the chamber. Saris didn't flinch, didn't look away. She stood firm, her hands gripping the console, knowing what had to happen. The power of the core was immense, but so was her will. As the shockwave spread outward, the ship began to disintegrate, the core crumbling under its own weight, its energy dissipating into the vast void of space. The battle was over. When the smoke cleared, Saris stood amidst the ruins of everything she had known. The universe was forever changed, but it had been saved. And as the remnants of the core drifted into the abyss, she felt a strange peace settle over her. She had made her choice. She had done what needed to be done, and with that she knew her journey had come to an end. The distress signal cut through the void like a whisper in the dark, a soft, pleading call from the farthest fringes of known space. Captain Noah Carter was alone, once again, floating in the quiet emptiness of his ship. The Starlight Wanderer drifted, her hull a lone, defiant speck against the vastness of the galaxy. Space was endless and cold. That's what Noah had learned in his years as a pilot. Endless and cold, with only the hum of the engine to keep him tethered to sanity. It had been months since his last mission, a simple cargo run that had taken him into the outermost reaches of the star system. But tonight, the hum had stopped. The vast silence had been broken. The signal was faint at first, barely more than static, but unmistakably human, or at least he had assumed so. The pattern was familiar, an emergency distress code, one used by the deep space freighters who sometimes lost contact with civilization. But as the ship's systems started to pull in the signal, something about it unsettled him. It was too close to the edge of the known territories, a place where no ships ever ventured unless they had no other choice. Noah's eyes narrowed as he flicked a switch on the console. The static cleared. The voice that followed was strained, breaking with every word. "Help, please. Critical failure. Life support." The transmission sputtered, barely coherent. The words were a mix of panic and desperation, barely holding together. "Coordinates." Then the transmission stopped. Noah stared at the blinking coordinates on his display. There was nothing special about the location, just another dead zone in space where shipwrecks and debris were more common than living travelers. But the chill running down his spine told him this was different. A human distress signal, or at least something close enough. His fingers hovered over the controls. Logic told him it could be a trap. It could be a ghost. Another lost ship, long since abandoned, drifting in silence. But then there was the voice, the human urgency that seemed real. His hand moved decisively, overriding the autopilot. The Wanderer's engines hummed louder, shifting toward the distant coordinates. The ship's body groaned, a reminder of its age and the countless hours it had spent out in the unforgiving depths. The stars outside his viewport blurred into streaks of light, the darkness around him thickening. Noah felt a flicker of unease, a gnawing sense that something was watching him, a presence far beyond the limits of the Wanderer's sensors. He ignored it. Space had a way of playing tricks on the mind. No time for distractions. He set his course. The signal still clung to the edges of his instruments, weak and fragile, but consistent. Noah held his breath, his fingers tracing the controls like a man on the brink of something dangerous, something unknown. And the journey felt long, even though it took mere hours to reach the coordinates. The signal had stopped transmitting altogether, but Noah wasn't about to turn back now. The black void outside his ship had deepened, and the silence between the stars felt heavier, more suffocating. The further he traveled, the more the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He arrived at the wreckage in what could only be described as a perfect silence. At first, there was nothing. The vast expanse of space around him was empty, the void as cold and silent as the grave. Then, far in the distance, just past the edge of a broken asteroid belt, he saw it. A ship. A wreck, half crumpled and burnt, drifting in orbit around a dead moon. Its lights flickered, its hull cracked open, revealing gaping wounds that would have spelled the end for any ordinary vessel. His pulse quickened as he slowed his ship's approach. The wreck looked too old for something so recently damaged. Pieces of debris floated around it, torn away by the wreckage's own violent death throes. But there was still life. Something alive on board. He could feel it. Noah didn't hesitate. He patched into the emergency beacon that pulsed weakly from the ruined hull. "This is Captain Noah Carter of the Starlight Wanderer." He spoke into the comms, his voice steady, though his heart was beginning to race. "I'm here to assist. If you can hear me, respond." Nothing. Just static. He was already unstrapping himself from his chair, preparing for the worst. It was instinct, honed after years of being alone in space. Always expect the unexpected. He grabbed his emergency pack and made his way to the airlock. The ship's silence seemed oppressive now, an unshakable weight pressing against him. As he initiated the docking sequence, the feeling that something was terribly wrong gnawed at him again. The airlock hissed open with a soft, metallic groan, and Noah stepped into the darkened interior of the wreck. The interior of the ship smelled faintly of smoke and something else, something organic. The low hum of the ship's residual power barely reached his ears, and in the distance, there was a sound, a soft, labored breathing, almost too faint to hear. His flashlight swept across the wreck's narrow halls, illuminating damaged walls and broken panels. In the farthest corner of the corridor, his light caught on something that made his blood run cold. A body. Or rather, something that had once been human. No, not human. The figure was sprawled across the floor, bloodied and barely conscious. Her skin was translucent, shimmering faintly as though lit by an inner glow. Her long dark hair floated around her in a cloud of strange light. Violet eyes, striking, almost unnatural, blinked slowly as she stared up at him, her breath shallow, coming in ragged gasps. She was an alien. Noah froze, unsure of what to do next. He had expected a survivor, but not like this. Not her. She raised her hand, trembling, and a low voice emerged from her throat, barely a whisper. "Help me." Noah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't just asking for help. She was pleading with him. And then, as if from somewhere deep within the core of her being, she spoke again, this time with an air of quiet inevitability. "You saved me, and now I am yours." Noah didn't understand. The words felt wrong, heavy with meaning he couldn't yet grasp. As the ship's lights flickered above them, he knew he had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. And whatever it wasn't something he could walk away from. Not now. Not ever. Noah couldn't take his eyes off her. The alien woman, her name, Celira, she had whispered in a voice that was both musical and desperate, lay on the cold metal floor of the Starlight Wanderer, breathing in ragged, uneven gasps. The ship around them was silent, save for the soft hum of its engines and the distant whine of the damaged air filtration system. Her glowing violet eyes, almost luminous in the half-light of the wreck, flickered toward him as if she could see straight through him. "You saved me," she said again, her words slow, deliberate, as if testing the very air between them. "And now I am yours." The phrase repeated in his mind like an echo in a hollow room. "I am yours." Noah stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. He had seen his fair share of strange, even terrifying things in his years of piloting ships through the unknown expanse of space. But this was something else entirely. He had known that answering a distress call could be dangerous. But he had never expected this. Her face, though battered and bruised from whatever catastrophe had destroyed her ship, still carried a haunting, almost ethereal beauty. The way her skin shimmered faintly, the odd, faintly transparent quality to her features. It was as though she existed just slightly beyond his world. She wasn't just an alien in the literal sense. She was something more. Something ancient. Her eyes never left his face, and Noah couldn't help but feel the weight of her gaze. But then, just as quickly as it had come, the feeling of awe was replaced with a creeping unease. Her words, "Now I am yours." He could feel his pulse quicken. What did that mean? Was this some kind of alien trickery? Some cultural quirk he didn't understand? Celira winced as she tried to sit up, but her injury, a deep gash running across her arm, stopped her. She flinched, biting back a groan of pain, and Noah immediately moved forward, instinct taking over. He knelt beside her, his breath catching as his hands hovered near her arm. But when his fingers brushed the wound, her skin didn't feel like human flesh. It was cool to the touch, almost metallic, and a subtle, almost electric hum ran beneath her surface. Her eyes locked on his again, the glow intensifying for a moment. "You do not understand," she murmured, her voice steady despite the pain. "In my culture, this is the way. The one who saves me, binds me." Noah recoiled slightly. "Bind you?" He swallowed, trying to make sense of the situation. "What are you talking about?" Her lips parted, but before she could respond, the ship's sensors beeped sharply, cutting through the tension. Noah's head snapped toward the console, his heart racing. He had almost forgotten the situation at hand, but the flashing warning lights brought him back to the reality of the moment. Draxians. The name lingered in his mind like the taste of ash. He had heard rumors about the Draxians, the brutal, almost mythical faction that was said to be sweeping through the galaxy, leaving only destruction in their wake. But to have them show up so soon, so close to him, it didn't make sense. Noah quickly ran his fingers over the ship's navigation panel, his mind working fast. He scanned the readings. There was a faint, almost imperceptible blip on the radar, a ship, large, well-armed, and it was heading straight for them. His breath hitched as the realization struck. The Draxians were here. Celira, still trembling from the pain, sensed the change in the atmosphere. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "They are coming for me," she said, her tone grim. "You cannot outrun them, Captain Carter. Not with that ship." Noah's pulse surged. "How do you know that?" Her eyes glowed brighter now, more intense, as though they could peer into the very fabric of space. "I have seen their markings," she whispered. "Their ships. They are relentless." For a moment, all Noah could hear was the thudding of his own heart. The Draxians. They must have tracked Silara's distress signal, found her ship drifting in the dark expanse, and now they were coming. Noah gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He wasn't equipped for a fight. His ship wasn't designed for combat. It was just a cargo hauler, built to fly under the radar, to avoid trouble. But there was no escaping this, no running. The Draxians had found him. "Prepare yourself," Silira said, her voice suddenly cold, almost detached. "They will stop at nothing to destroy me, and you will be in their way." Noah clenched his fists. "We'll see about that." He moved quickly to the cockpit, firing up the ship's weapon systems. His hands flew across the controls, trying to make sense of the data. The Draxians were closing in fast. There wasn't much time to prepare, but there was one thing Noah knew for sure. He couldn't let them get to her, not after everything he had seen. But then another thought hit him like a blow to the chest. He wasn't the one they were after. She was. Silira's voice broke through his thoughts. "They will kill you, Captain. For me." He didn't reply at first. The ship's radar showed the Draxian ship, its form now growing clearer on the screens. A sleek, menacing silhouette that gleamed in the darkness, sharp-edged like a predator in the dark. It was almost as if it were a living thing, cutting through the black void with an unnatural precision. Silira was right. The odds were stacked against them. His ship wasn't made for a fight, and he had no training to handle this kind of threat. But the cold reality of his situation was quickly sinking in. If he couldn't outrun the Draxians, his only other option was to fight. A low rumble echoed through the ship's hull and the lights flickered. The Draxians were almost on them. Noah's breath steadied, his hands clenched tightly around the controls. His gaze shifted to the quiet figure of Silira, still seated in the shadows of the cockpit. Her glowing eyes fixed on him, an unspoken understanding passing between them. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for her. And in that moment, Noah Carter realized something. He might have saved her life, but the battle was just beginning. The Draxian ship loomed ever closer, its sleek, sinister silhouette eclipsing the stars as it approached, with an inevitability that seemed to press on Noah's chest like the weight of the galaxy itself. The cold blue of his cockpit was washed out by the harsh red warning lights, flashing across every console. His hands shook as they gripped the controls, the steady hum of the Starlight Wanderer's engines suddenly inadequate, weak in the face of what was coming. Silira stood behind him, silent. Noah could feel her presence like a shadow in the corner of his mind, a constant reminder that he was no longer just a pilot, flying alone through the endless dark. He was now a man on the precipice of something much greater than himself, a conflict that stretched far beyond the borders of known space, far beyond the quiet safety of his life as a cargo pilot. "What do you know about them?" Noah asked, his voice cutting through the tense stillness. His fingers hovered over the weapon systems, but the cold realization settled in. His ship wasn't equipped for a battle like this. It wasn't a fighter. It wasn't even a warship. It was a transport vessel built for speed, not combat. Silira's eyes, glowing faintly with that eerie violet light, flickered toward the viewport. "I know they are relentless," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an edge of cold fury. "I know they are without mercy. They will destroy everything in their path to see me dead. And if they cannot do that—" She trailed off, her words hanging heavy in the air. Noah swallowed. "And if they can't get to you, they'll destroy you, and anyone who gets in their way." Her gaze shifted to his, unblinking. "They will not stop until they have wiped my people from existence, and they will not hesitate to do the same to you." A jolt of fear shot through him, but Noah fought it down. He wasn't going to let fear control him. Not now. He punched a series of commands into the console, engaging the ship's evasive maneuvers. The Wanderer jolted, and the hull groaned in protest as it veered sharply to the left, its engines screaming as they pushed to gain speed. But even with every ounce of power from the ship's engines, it was too slow. The Draxian ship was closing in. Its weapon systems began to hum, a deep, bone-rattling vibration that reverberated through the metal beneath Noah's feet. "Brace yourself," Noah said through gritted teeth. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to Selira, to himself, or to the ship, but as the Draxian ship loomed closer, his stomach churned with a gnawing sense of helplessness. The moment the Draxians fired, everything happened at once. A blinding flash of green energy streaked through the void, striking the Wanderer's aft shield. The ship lurched violently, throwing Noah against his seat. His vision blurred, and for a second, he thought he might black out. The ship groaned, the shields flickering weakly under the intense pressure. The Wanderer wasn't built for this. It wasn't meant for combat. "Captain!" Selira's voice rang out sharply, a sharp crackle of fear breaking through her usual calm. He could hear the desperation in her tone now, her voice taut with urgency. "We need to do something or they will tear us apart." He knew she was right, but what could he do? His mind raced, scrambling for any possible advantage, any edge. The Draxians had him outclassed, outgunned. Then a realization gripped him with cold clarity. He didn't have to fight them head-on, not with strength, not with firepower, but with knowledge. Selira had said she was being hunted, that they were relentless, that they wouldn't stop until she was dead. But why? What was it about her, about them, that made them so valuable to the Draxians? What could they possibly want from her? And more importantly, why was she the last of her kind? "Wait," he muttered aloud, as the answers began to click into place. Selira glanced at him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you thinking?" Noah didn't answer at first. He toggled through the Wanderer's outdated systems, trying to access old records, anything that might tell him about the Draxians. Information on them was scarce. They didn't leave survivors. But there had to be something, anything, to give him an edge. It wasn't much, but then he found it. A fragment of data buried in the ship's files, hidden in a dusty archive. It was a report from a galactic scout who had once made it his mission to explore the edges of known space, long before the Draxians had become the terror they were today. The scout had encountered something in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, something terrifying, something that could destroy civilizations, a race lost to time, with powers that defied understanding. And one of them, this scout had written, was said to have survived. The Zethians. The name sent a shiver down Noah's spine. He remembered hearing whispers about them in the shadows of spaceports, ancient stories of a civilization that had vanished eons ago, leaving no trace but myths. And now, here was Selira, alive, the last of her kind. Suddenly, the Draxians weren't just a threat. They were hunting her for something else. He turned to face her, a wave of understanding washing over him. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. The Draxians weren't here for her death. They were here to capture her, to use her. "They're after your blood," he said, the words falling from his lips before he could stop them. "You're not just any alien species. You're Zythian." Selira's face betrayed no emotion, but her violet eyes darkened, the glow dimming slightly. She didn't deny it. She didn't need to. "Not just my blood," she said softly, her voice tinged with a bitterness Noah hadn't heard before. "They seek what remains of my people's power, what was left when they destroyed us. They believe it will grant them the strength to control the galaxy." Noah's breath caught in his throat. That was what this was about. This wasn't just a fight for survival. The Draxians weren't hunting her out of malice alone. They were hunting her because they needed her. They needed the power of her kind. Noah turned back to the controls. A cold determination had set in. He wasn't just going to be a pawn in this, not while she was in his care. "You're not going anywhere with them," he said, his voice hard. "I'm not letting them take you." Selira's expression softened, just slightly, as if she were silently assessing him in a way she hadn't before. "You cannot stop them, Captain," she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. "But I will help you, if you can keep us both alive." And for the first time, Noah understood that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something much larger than either of them. The stakes had just escalated in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend, but one thing was certain. They were no longer just running for their lives. They were fighting for the very future of the galaxy. The course of his life had changed irrevocably, and there was no turning back. The Starlight Wanderer shuddered beneath Noah's hands as he guided it through the black void of space. The stars, once distant and impassive, now seemed to mock him as they sped past, glimmering coldly through the shattered windows of the cockpit. The Draxians had given chase, their relentless pursuit almost a certainty. The reality of the situation began to settle in. He was no longer just fighting for survival. Now it was a matter of choice. Selira, the last of the Zythians, sat behind him, silent but present, her violet eyes burning through the air with a force he could not ignore. She had barely spoken since their last conversation, but Noah could sense the gravity of her thoughts. She was weighing something, and he didn't need to ask to know it was something crucial. The danger they were in was so deep, so consuming, that it had a way of narrowing the mind to a single truth. They were about to make a choice, and that choice would define everything that came after. "We need to find a way to lose them," Noah said, his voice hard, his fingers tapping against the console. He had no illusions about their chances. The Starlight Wanderer was no match for the Draxian ship in terms of firepower, speed, or maneuverability. His best chance was to confuse them, to disappear into the star systems, using the gravity wells of nearby planets to mask their heat signatures. But it wasn't a plan he had much faith in. Selira's gaze shifted to the control panel. She knew the mechanics of space travel, of tactics, but her thoughts seemed elsewhere. "Their ship is designed to track us, Captain. No matter how fast you fly, they will always find you." Her voice had an edge of finality to it, as though she had come to terms with this reality long before he had. Noah's jaw clenched. She's not wrong, he thought. He had been running, hoping for a miracle, but miracles weren't the way of the galaxy. Not anymore. Then, without warning, her words hit him like a thunderclap. "There is a place," she said, her voice low but steady, "where they cannot follow. A place where the Draxians have no influence, but it comes with a cost." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into the silence. "And I do not think you are ready to pay it." Noah's gaze flickered to her, his breath catching. The tension in the air thickened. "What do you mean?" Selira's expression softened, her lips curling into something between a frown and a grimace. "I will take you to the Zythian refuge." Noah's pulse quickened, but he didn't let his surprise show. The Zythian refuge, a place that had once been a legend, whispered about in hushed tones across the galaxy. It was said to be hidden in the heart of a dead star system, a place untouched by the wars that had torn the galaxy apart. A place where the Zythians had fled, long before the Draxians had become the unstoppable force they were now. But that wasn't what caused his heart to hammer in his chest. "It's a trap," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. "Isn't it?" Selira's eyes flickered, the violet glow dimming with something darker. "Not a trap, but it will require something, more than you are willing to give." Noah's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" Selira rose from her seat, her movement graceful but deliberate, her body shifting as though she were something more than human. Her eyes never left his. "The Zythian refuge can only be reached through the Gate of Silence. It is a door between the worlds, a place where time, space, and reality itself bend. The Draxians cannot follow us through it, but neither can you." A chill ran down Noah's spine. "You're telling me I'll be left behind?" She nodded slowly, her face betraying nothing but quiet resolve. "To use the gate is to make a sacrifice. You will never be able to return to your world. You will never see Earth again. You will be lost to the galaxy, just as I was." His breath caught in his throat. Never see Earth again. It was more than just the idea of being lost in space. It was the thought of never seeing the people he had left behind, of never returning home. "Then what?" he demanded, his voice rising. "You'll just disappear into the stars, and I'll be left to face the Draxians alone?" Salira's face softened, but her eyes were hard, as though she had already accepted this outcome. "I will give you a choice," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "You can come with me, but you will be bound to the Gate of Silence, never to return. The Draxians will never find you, but you will be lost. Or you can stay, fight, and die. You will die for nothing, for they will never stop hunting me. You may take your chances, Captain, but you will lose." For a long moment, Noah didn't say anything. His mind reeled, the weight of the decision pressing on him from all sides. Everything he had ever known, the safety of his life as a pilot, the sense of belonging to a world that had long since left the chaos behind, was slipping through his fingers like sand. But then, something deeper than logic stirred within him. A feeling, a connection with Salira. She was right. The Draxians wouldn't stop. They would destroy him, destroy everything he had known, simply because of her. He wasn't ready to accept that. "You can't ask me to make that decision," he said, his voice strained. His throat tightened, the words sticking in his chest. The choice before him felt like an impossible one. The consequences of every path weighed heavily, and yet there was only one truth that he couldn't deny. She needed him. Salira's eyes never wavered, though her gaze seemed to soften, a flicker of something resembling understanding in her expression. "I am sorry, Captain. I did not want this for you, but this is the only way. The Gate of Silence offers no return. It is a one-way path." Noah stood, the pressure in his chest almost unbearable, as he tried to grasp the enormity of her words. A one-way path. There was no going back. There was no choosing a second option. But his heart had already chosen. It wasn't the stars or the galaxies that called to him now. It was the life he had come to share with her, the life that had been thrust upon him in the darkness of space. He looked at Salira, his voice low but steady. "Then let's go. Take me there." Her gaze softened, the light in her eyes shifting, and for a fleeting moment, Noah saw something he hadn't seen before. Gratitude and fear. "Then we leave now," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Before they find us." Noah didn't speak again, the decision settling into his bones, heavy and final. There was no way forward except through the unknown, no path but the one they would carve together. The Wanderer veered sharply to the left, its engines roaring to life as they shot into the darkness of space, toward the unknown, toward the last refuge of a people long gone, and the cost they would pay to reach it. The silence of the Gate of Silence was deafening. It was a space that existed outside of time, where the stars no longer glittered, and the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist into unimaginable shapes. It was as if they had crossed into a place that did not belong in the universe, a void untouched by the cruelty of war or the rush of time. Only the soft hum of the ship's engines broke the stillness, a fragile thread tethering them to reality. Noah sat at the controls of the Starlight Wanderer, his hands steady, but his mind adrift in the vastness of this strange, liminal space. His eyes flicked to the navigation screen, where the galaxy was a distant memory, a map of a world he would never touch again. He could feel Salira's presence behind him, her aura like a quiet pulse in the air. It had been days since they entered the gate, but time was no longer something he could measure. In this place, there was no future or past, only an eternal present, one that stretched infinitely before them and ended in a place they could not yet see. Salira had remained quiet, as though the weight of their decision had settled into her bones. For all the resolve she had shown in the face of their journey, the silence between them now was heavy with something unsaid. A burden, a choice made, and the consequences of that choice rippling through the fabric of their lives. Noah broke the silence first, his voice hoarse, as if the years of uncertainty had finally caught up with him. "How long until we get there?" His words felt foreign in the quiet of the gate, like echoes bouncing off an invisible wall. Salira's voice was calm, but distant. "Not long now. We will reach the refuge soon." Her eyes, glowing softly in the dim light of the ship, flickered to the distant void outside the cockpit windows. "Once we pass through this space, we will arrive at the last sanctuary of my people. The refuge is hidden, and the Draxians cannot follow us here. We are safe." The words were a balm, but they didn't soothe the storm inside him. He knew what the refuge represented. It was not just a sanctuary. It was the last thread of hope for an entire species, a place where the Zithians could rebuild, start anew, and it was a place where he had no place, no future. The price of this salvation was the final severance from the universe he had known, from Earth, from everything that had defined his life. But there was something else gnawing at him, something more pressing than his own loss. Something about Salira had changed in these final moments of their journey. She was no longer the enigmatic, powerful warrior he had come to rely on. She seemed smaller somehow. The weight of her culture, of her people's legacy, had settled into her bones, and the responsibility of it all seemed to overwhelm her. He turned to her, his voice low but firm. "What happens when we get there? What happens to you, Salira?" Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the vast emptiness of space seemed to close in around them. "I will be bound to the refuge," she said quietly. "It is the way of my people. The refuge is a sanctuary, but it is also a place of healing. The Zithians can rebuild here. But for me, there is no return. I will remain in service to this place, to this legacy. I will never leave it." Noah's heart clenched. The decision, the sacrifice, that had loomed over him for so long was now an inescapable reality. She had been right all along. She had given up everything for this, and in doing so, she had asked him to give up everything too. There was no return to Earth, no more missions, no more future as a pilot in a galaxy teetering on the brink of war. "Will you be happy there?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. He hated how vulnerable they made him sound, but it was a question he had to ask. Salira didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at him, as if searching for something in his face. "I do not know," she said, her voice thick with an emotion he couldn't place. "But I will have purpose, and that is enough." Noah leaned back in his seat, staring out into the void, the stars now barely visible through the thickening haze of the gate. He wanted to tell her that she deserved more than purpose, that she deserved freedom, a future, a chance to live as she had before the Draxians had destroyed her people. He wanted to tell her that they could fight, that they could go back and make a stand against the Draxians together. But he knew those words were empty. The Draxians would never stop coming, and there was no going back to the life they had known. He turned to her, his voice low and steady. "I won't forget you, Salira. I won't forget what you did. You saved me and I saved you. In my own way, I'll carry you with me." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, she looked human, vulnerable, just like him. "I will remember you too, Captain. You are the last human I will ever know, and you will always be the one who gave me a chance." The ship jolted suddenly, a shockwave running through its hull. The gate of silence flickered briefly, the edges of reality warping in a disorienting dance, and then, as if the universe had finally exhaled, they emerged from the void. Before them lay a star system, a dead one, its stars dark and burned out, a graveyard of celestial bodies. The planet before them, once lush and full of life, was now an untouched, perfect world, isolated in a way that felt both eerie and serene. The refuge. Salira stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the planet. Her posture was different now, less guarded, as though she had reached the end of a long, weary journey. "We are here," she whispered. "This is the end of the road, and the beginning of something else." Noah stared at the world before them, a world that would now be home to a people long lost, a place of healing and rebirth. But he couldn't stay. He knew that now, deep in his bones. His journey had reached its end, and Silira's had only just begun. He stood, his hand hovering over the controls, but not with the urgency he once had. There was nothing left to fight, nothing left to prove. "This is where we part ways, Silira," he said, his voice steady, though his heart threatened to betray him. "I hope you find peace here." And with that he turned, leaving behind the woman who had changed everything, the woman who had saved him, and in return, asked for nothing but the chance to serve. The Starlight Wanderer hummed as it drifted toward the darkened horizon, the last tie to the past severed. As the ship pulled away, Noah glanced back one last time. Silira was watching him, standing tall, a faint smile touching her lips. Her eyes glowed softly in the twilight of their departure, and for a brief moment, the galaxy felt smaller, more intimate, an endless expanse of stars and worlds, all intertwined by a single, unbreakable thread. And that was enough.